Hello, I'm Darryl Jones, and I'm here with David Ward for Musicians on the Record, and let's get it started.
1, 2, 3, 4. This is huge, musicians on the record. Bring it on.
Hi, welcome to Musicians on the Record. I'm David Ward. You've heard the music, now hear their story, and you've definitely heard this guy's music today. On the show, the amazing bass player for the Rolling Stones, for Miles Davis, for Sting, and many more. Darryl Jones is on the show. Welcome, Darryl.
Thank you very much for having me, David.
I'm thrilled to have you on the show today. I'm wondering if we could start with one of the biggest things coming up this year for you. Obviously, the Stones going back on tour in May in Europe. It's the No Filter Tour. Any sense of what that name means, why that was called that?
No, not at all, really.
Okay.
I'm not privy to those conversations.
Okay.
That happens above my pay grade, I guess.
Okay, yeah, they didn't run it by you. They didn't focus group it with you.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, great. So can you give us a glimpse of a day in the life of what it's like to be on tour with the Stones and what kind of preparation? I mean, we're at the end of March now. How do you have to prepare for a Stones tour?
Well, I mean, for any tour, I generally, like to try to get into decent shape, just because it's a little bit harder to maintain that kind of, exercise regimen and stuff like that on the road. So I spend some time trying to just, get clear, get clean a little bit and, get my health together and lose a few pounds if that's possible. And then basically all of the preparation for the tour really musically happens, during the couple of weeks of rehearsal that we do leading up to the tour. So yeah, we'll get started with that. And the interesting thing is that in the last since 2012, when the Stones there was a 5-year period where they didn't tour between 2007 and 2012. After that time, the band has toured a little bit differently, not quite as long, tours, and but everyone seems to have. It seems that everyone is able to keep their place a bit better, so we don't need as much rehearsal as we once did. We used to rehearse 6 or 8 weeks before a big tour, and now not more than a couple of weeks, because everybody keeps their place, and everybody's playing really well, and so it just takes us a couple of weeks to kind of prepare, and off we go.
Can you give us a little bit of a behind the scenes, a glimpse of what it's like rehearsing with the Stones? What are you doing? You're probably not focusing on honky tonk woman that you're trying to get it right, more of a different arrangement.
Well, more the most of the rehearsal goes to songs that we're adding to the set, things that we haven't played for a while or haven't played ever. There are a few things that come up in that way. And so those songs generally get or unless we're doing a rearrangement of something, otherwise, most of the rehearsal goes to just regaining some balance on things that we haven't played for a while or polishing up, things that are going to be new to the show.
Sure. I saw you guys with a buddy of mine a couple of years ago back in Boston at the Boston Garden, and they say, so much stuff around 50 years and all of that. I think if you do anything for 50 years, you're going to get better at that. And I was just blown away how tight the band was, how much energy there was. I mean, it was great in the 60s and 70s, but it's fantastic today. So much energy.
Yeah, no, I have a lot of fans coming and telling me, fans that have been, have seen 100 plus shows over the last 50 years or 50, 55 now, almost more than 55 now, that they feel like the band is playing better now than they ever have. And I think, a number of things happen. Obviously, like you say, you do something long enough, you get good at it. I think the other thing is, they are also at an age where they are consciously more appreciative of the position that they have, and so they all take it very, very seriously. And I think, and everybody seems to be. There was a period before I joined the band where they were all on the road with their own separate bands.
Right. Yes.
And because I didn't play with them before that, I'm not, uniquely in a position to really comment on it. But what I'm told by people who were around before and after I came on is that during that period, they all got to be better musicians. And they had to kind of go and front their own bands. And so I think that I do know that Voodoo Lounge, the record that I came and record, they had never recorded basic tracks in 5 weeks, which is what we recorded basic tracks on that record for. Apparently, it had taken them a lot longer than that. So I think they all got to be much better musicians, and that has just continued over the last, 25 years.
Right.
Funny when you say it like that.
Right. Yeah, because you've been in the band for a long time now, right?
Yeah, since November of 1993. So that makes it, I'm in the 25th year.
Right. That's incredible. Congratulations on that. I want to talk a little bit about the story of with you and Miles Davis of getting that gig. I'm also curious about how the audition went. I mean, obviously you got the gig, but with the Stones, what was that whole process like for you?
The audition with the Stones was actually, it's funny because the two auditions that, that have been, the pinnacles, and I guess in a way of my career, the audition with Miles and the audition with the Stones, were both very informal. It was not nearly as, there was nobody sitting behind a table asking me questions and telling me play this now and play that now. As a matter of fact, when I walked into the room, Mick, he introduced himself and said, "You remember we met during the filming of Bring on the Night?" And I said, "Of course, I remember that." He says, "So listen, man, if you don't know the songs, we'll teach you the songs and then we'll have the audition."
Wow. Okay.
It doesn't really get more informal than that. So everybody was very comfortable, and Ronnie introduced himself and offered me a Guinness, and so of course I knew Keith from his dealings with Charlie Drayton and Steve Jordan and the Expensive Winos. So yeah, it was meeting Charlie and sitting down and playing through a bunch of the hits, and a few months later, I came in and they'd written much of the material for Voodoo Lounge. I came in and played through some of that stuff, and they asked me to record with them.
Wow. And that's how you found out you got the gig?
Well, that's how I found out I was going to record with them. It wasn't until that would have been in October of 93, when they were doing additional recording in Los Angeles in January of 94. I guess I came to the studio to hang out and just missed Charlie. And Keith remarked to me, he said, "Did you see Charlie, man? He just left." And I said, "Well, I guess I missed him because I just arrived and I didn't see him." And he said, "Well, when he was here, he asked me, he says, so we've recorded the record now, and, we used Darryl, and so we're going to use him on tour, right, Keith?" And Keith told me that he said to Charlie, "Well, of course, man, yeah, we're going to use Darryl." He says, Charlie said to him, "Well, don't you think we ought to tell him, And so Keith, says, "So, man, we'd love to have you come and tour with us." And that's how that part of the thing happened. I was actually asked to record first, and then a few months later, I was asked to join the band.
Amazing. What was that first show like with the Stones? Nervous? Okay, where were you at with that?
We'd rehearsed a lot. They hadn't played since Steel Wheels. And so we rehearsed for several weeks up in Toronto. And so we were, by showtime, we were pretty much ready to rock. So I don't remember being particularly nervous. It was definitely an eye-opening experience to see the enthusiasm of a Stones crowd. That was something that was pretty amazing to see. The Stones fans are are from my experience, unlike almost anybody else. They're really dedicated fans, and they're enthusiastic, and you hear them, and they're singing along, and everybody's having a great time. So that was a pretty unique experience.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, there's also great Miles fans and great Sting fans, but Stones fans definitely, I guess, also because of the number of them, you know, make their imprint on you made their imprint on you pretty early on.
Yeah, sure. I mean, so many iconic songs, right? So can we, you know, I've had the luxury a little bit because I was at the sessions.org panel at the NAMM show a couple of years ago when you told some of your story, which was really great. But can I ask you to recap some of that, of when did you fall in love with music in the first place?
Well, music had always been a part of the household that I grew up in. My father was listening to early Miles and Oscar Peterson and John Coltrane and Count Basie was maybe his favorite.
Yeah.
And my mom was always listening to soul music on the radio on WVON, which is the soul station in Chicago. A lot of James Brown, Curtis Mayfield, blues. And Sly and the Family Stone was a big presence when I, was coming of age. And my mom took us to see James Brown pretty much for a period there. She took us to see James Brown whenever she could take a child to see James Brown. You know, I saw him at Soldier Field,
wow,
at the International Amphitheater in Chicago, nice. Chicago Stadium. And so music was always a part of my childhood. And I guess because of my parents' love of music, I inherited that from them even before I was a musician. I remember dancing to Motown, when I was 4 or 5 or 6 years old, my cousin and I, putting our socks on and sliding across the wood floor, trying to dance like James Brown. So I guess that was imprinted on me at a very, very young age, that music was just a part of life. And it was a little bit later that my father played drums, or he had a practice pad. And so he would practice with this practice pad. And again, that was something that I remember as far back as I can remember. I decided that I wanted to be like him and play drums. And so he bought me a little practice pad and some little sticks. I must have been 7 years old, I guess. And he pulled from under the bar that he'd built in the basement a package which contained a small xylophone. And he, familiarized me with the notes and with a major scale and with a chromatic scale. And that was basically how I started. And it was a couple of years later that I saw a neighbor, a guy who lived 2 doors down, Angus Thomas, saw him and a bunch of his friends play in the elementary school talent show. And I do remember, for a number of reasons, when I saw that performance, it was very, very clear to me that I wanted to make music my life. I was not yet 10 years old. I was 9 years old.
Wow. Powerful moment.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it hit me pretty hard. I think it was, first of all, I was a kind of quiet kid, pretty shy. Okay. And I guess the response of the audience, because there had been people twirling batons and tap dancing and stuff like that. But so see the curtains open and see a band playing, and to realize that not only did I know some of the guys, know Angus, but the other guys who were on stage had been my play leaders, which was like the older kids who watch you during recess and elementary school. I knew, most of the guys in the band. And so, that was the beginning for me. And I have to say that looking back on it, I was as sure of that as I have been of anything in my life. I was sure that I was like, that's it. That's what I'm going to do. That's what I'm going to be.
Yeah. Amazing.
And pretty much and I decided when I see Angus again, the first time I see him, I'm going to ask him to teach me to play. And He said, "Do you want to learn how to play bass guitar or lead guitar?" And I said, "What do you play?" And he said, "I play the bass." And I said, "Well, I want to learn how to play the bass." And that's how this whole thing started. There was already a guitar in the house. It wasn't a bass guitar, but there was a guitar in the house, and he started teaching me on this 6-string Norma guitar that I'm sure my mother bought from Sears. And it had been around the house 2 or 3 years before I picked it up. So, it was, I had a lot of encouragement from my parents and a lot of support from my family, and so I went into music, and I've not regretted a day of it.
Right. It sounds like it's worked out pretty well for you, which is great. Why do you think, in addition to Angus playing the bass, and, we all have folks we idealize, what is it about the bass that calls to you? Because you stuck with it. You could have played the bass a little bit and then I want to try guitar. What is it about the bass that really feeds you?
Well, I don't know. The first time someone asked me that was the first time I was in Paris with Miles, and Marie Francois, I'll never forget that, asked me she asked me the same question, and I thought about that for the first time, and it occurred to me, or I considered it for the first time. I came from a very, very stable household, and I think that both my connection to the bass and my ability to, or the sense that it is the right instrument for me, or I should say at this point, one of the right instruments for me, is that it connotes stability, and so I think that, coming up in such a stable household, I think maybe that has something to do with it. Many years later, Angus was in, he lives in Europe, and he was teaching, and he would have a lot of young students come to him and say, "I want you to teach me to play like Darryl Jones," and he would actually say to me, he says, "Man, in the articles, you always mention my name as your teacher, and you've gone on and done so much." He says, "Man, we really did teach each other after that initial point of me showing you how to play." And he said something to me. He said, looking at it now from the perspective of hindsight, he said, "You were a bass player a long time before you picked up the instrument." It was just one of those things, man. I think that I found the right instrument for my personality and for the way I grew up, and at the same time, he was a good enough teacher to also introduce me to different icons that I could take certain things from. Okay. Jimi Hendrix being one, and I think, Hendrix represents for me a certain wildness, or a certain desire to go a little bit outside of what would be considered kind of normal or proper. It's a certain kind of irreverence, is maybe the word for it, And so Miles Davis, him being an icon in my life, both before and after I became a musician, definitely, pushing boundaries a little bit, not fitting into, the whole. I have several, different artists who I think I've gained something from, even though I don't play that instrument well. Right. I'm holding guitars, 6-string guitars now. And
are you? Yeah.
Trying to learn how to play, but I wouldn't say that I'm a guitarist quite yet.
Yeah. Well, probably none of us are going to be like Hendrix, right? He's the top of the heap right there. So, yeah. So that's amazing, because it sounds like those guys helped. The bass really is that foundation of the band with the rhythm section, but helps you express your own voice as well, right?
True, absolutely.
Yeah. Can you talk about the rhythm section of a band, Darryl, how important that is, and what do you think makes a good rhythm section and a good bassist?
Well, a good rhythm section. I think it will sound like it's a given, but listening. Musicians that really listen to each other. And I don't mean in that kind of normal, the TV's in the background, I'm kind of listening to it way. I mean, in a very active way. I think, when you're home alone and you're in the shower and you hear a strange noise, that way of listening, when you're really when in a way, what I learned from playing with both Otis Clay, who was a Chicago or artist from Chicago or out of Chicago, he's probably from the South somewhere, but from him and from Miles Davis, from playing with both of them, is you're listening not just to the music, but you're also listening to the intentions of the musicians around you. And to the extent that you can kind of cross that line and your listening becomes where you're really trying to understand the intentions of the musicians around you, then you become a musician, a rhythm section musician who is really worth his salt, I think. The drummer should kind of be able to, in a way, intuit what the lead vocalist is doing, and as well as everyone else. So I think that's one of the things that's really necessary, a really keen sense of listening and intuiting. I think you have to take each different genre of music and look at it seriously. I don't think that musicians who think they can play one kind of music and automatically think if they can play that they can play other kinds of music. I don't think that you really get to the meat of the genre that you're trying to learn. I think if you're trying to learn to play classical music, you have to take that as seriously. If you're trying to learn how to play jazz, you have to take that seriously. Rock and roll, all of these different things, reggae music. I think you have to go and listen to the people who established what those kinds of genres mean and what they sound like. When we were recording "You Don't Have to Mean It" with the Stones, I asked Keith. I said, "Listen, man, I don't have a lot of experience with reggae. Make me a tape of your favorite stuff, so that I can really hear what guys are doing. I'm hip to Family Man, but there's so many other guys." And I asked him to really, help me educate myself about those things. And I think that those kinds of things are very, very important for not only rhythm section musicians, but any musician. You have to know the history of the music that you're playing.
Absolutely.
And you have to do some research, and you have to learn it, first from those people who, James Jamerson is a perfect example. If you want to play soul music or rhythm and blues, you gotta go to school, and it doesn't necessarily mean that I would recommend the guys transcribe stuff, but you have to at least listen to it enough that you understand where he's coming from, and so those are some of the things that I think are important for musicians, generally speaking.
That's incredible. Can you say that this concept of the intention of a musician, learning and listening to the intention, can you give us an example around that? Like when you started playing with Miles Davis, how did you learn his intention of music?
Well, you do it. It comes through listening. It comes through, I guess, what I'll call, for lack of a better term, active listening. Not long after I joined the band, he decided that he wanted to play the Cyndi Lauper tune, Time After Time. Okay. And of course, at the moment, I thought, wow, I'm in the band now. He wants to play pop tunes. Well, the truth is, he had been doing that for 30 years, before I joined him, or even longer, 40 years. But he said, learn that. He asked me, he said, Darryl, learn that tune. We're going to play that tune. And so when we started to rehearse it, there's the part that goes, da, 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 da. He said, we're going to stay there. We're not just going to play that and move to the da, 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 da part. So we're going to vamp on that. And he said, and when I go to da, 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 just go there. And I said, what do you mean, Miles? Like 16 bars, 32 miles? And he looked at me and said, when I go there, go there. And, me being young and, full of like, indignation, I was like, okay. And I decided right in that moment, I'm going to watch him and I'm going to listen. And when he goes, I'm going to go with him, and I'm just going to watch him, and something is going to tell me when to go. And so sure enough, we get on stage and we're playing the tune, and he's vamping on that part and he's playing over it. And something told me, I'm looking at his body and I'm listening to him. Something told me he's going to go next time. Now, if you're a musician and you understand how that song works, I have to play at the same time he goes, da, da, I have to change.
Right.
So I have to be there right at the moment that he's there. But I just kept watching him and listening. And I said to myself, he's going to go. And so I went, and he went, and he stopped for a second and looked up at me like, but that's my point. That's an example of what I'm speaking about, where you're not just listening.
Yeah.
You're watching, you're trying to intuit what is going to happen with the music. And I think, you really separate yourself from some of the guys who don't, who are not listening as carefully, or who are not paying as careful attention. I think the great musicians are ones that not only play well, but really listen well. And so I would say that, that's very important for me.
That's absolutely beautiful. Just hearing that whole story, it really is. That's part of the craft of listening to music. Yeah. Also, of course, with the rhythm section, you play with one of the best in Charlie Watts. Can you tell us a little bit about what you love about Charlie and his playing? Well,
Charlie's just, he's such an interesting combination of these elements. He is, without, I know Charlie, so I don't want to say something that will embarrass him, but the truth is him, along with, Ringo Starr and a few others, probably a number of others, they really invented rock and roll drumming.
Right. Yeah.
And so I took the attitude that I should just listen to him very carefully and try to meld what I'm doing, with him. He is, I don't say that he's not necessarily the only point of contact, but he is my first point of contact, as he was the day that I auditioned for the Stones. I mean, I realized, it was very easy to come into the audition and look at Mick and Keith and go, wow, well, if I want the job, I guess I have to impress them. But that's not the way that I was thinking that day. I really decided, if I play well with Charlie, the rest will take care of itself.
Yeah, great.
And I will also learn, but I thought the first order of business is to play with Charlie. And still to this day, that is really what I do. Not necessarily to the exclusion of anyone else, but that's my first point of contact.
Sure.
He is incredibly steady, but not to the point of being clockish, There is some breathing and some movement, which you miss when you hear sometimes, for instance, you'll be at a wedding and you'll hear a really great wedding band play a Rolling Stones song. And you'll say to yourself, that sounds really good, but it lacks a certain swagger that and looseness that is very, very much a part of the Rolling Stones sound. And I think a lot of that starts with Charlie Watts. He has a way of being very, very steady without being metronome-like, which I think is important for almost, for almost any kind of music, I really did think for many years that music should be, by the clock and all of that stuff. And the older I get and the more I understand the way music is played, and there should be some breathing, and he's great at that. I think I think we've learned how to support the band together in a way that is very unique. I just dig it, man. I dig playing with him. We have a lock. I am not the kind of person who will ever, or it's rare when I will, toot my own horn about, the way that I play, but I will toot my horn a bit about the way Charlie Watts and I play together. Yeah. I think we have something very, very special, and I'm very proud of that.
Yeah, no question. Toot away on that, because it's incredible. He got the loudest ovation at the end of the show. I mean, the whole crowd just stood up and went, Charlie. Charlie was incredible. Yeah. The other piece for him, not only a great rock drummer, but he's a incredible jazz drummer as well. Did that help your jazz playing, your background playing with Miles? Is that part of the connection as well?
That is definitely part of the connection. We both love jazz music. And I would say, in Charlie's case, though he has been playing rock and roll all of these years, I would say that jazz is probably his first love of music. And so we definitely share those things. We're always talking about this artist or that artist. And in many cases, he's speaking firsthand because he's seen a lot of the jazz greats, for many years before I was even playing. And so that definitely is something that we have in common. You would not know it to look at me, but we also really love clothing.
All right.
You can tell by looking at him, but you can't always tell by looking at me. So we talk about that kind of stuff a lot. We both love to read. We love books.
Okay.
We have a lot in common. He's a really lovely, really funny, in a way that, that obviously a lot of people don't know, but great sense of very, very well-developed sense of humor. And we get along great. I have nothing but great things to say about him. He's an elegant fellow, a proper English gentleman, and also, and he's a jazzer and a rock and roller. So it's,
what more could you want, right? Has your jazz playing, because I hear this from most people, learning jazz makes you a better rock player, or actually quite a bit better any kind of player. That jazz is really, if you can learn that, that's really
well. I think that there are some things. Again, jazz music is based on a number of things. One is the musicians must listen to each other in order to create jazz. So again, we're back to listening. I think that in order to improvise, you have to develop a repertoire of different things to play. You have to understand theory in a way that might be a little bit more intense than with maybe pop music or that kind of thing. I don't believe that just the simple act of playing jazz will necessarily make you a better rock and roll musician. I think you have to take those same that same intensity that you use to learn jazz music to learn rock and roll music. And I think under those circumstances, then all of those things become something that you learn more and more from. I would say the same thing is true about classical music. You want to develop technique, you want to develop those kinds of things, a cleanliness, mastery of your instrument. Classical music is going to help you do that in the same way that I think jazz, well, in a way parallel to the way that jazz music will do. So, and in a way, it goes back to something that Miles said to me. One art helps the other. He encouraged me to draw, to paint, to cook food. All of these things, like this amount of this ingredient, add a little bit of that. This color, add a little bit of that color. All of these senses of challenging yourself to exercise those senses helps other arts, and so I think it would necessarily be true about different kinds of music.
Sure. No question. Yeah. And do you do some of those, Darryl, the art, painting, cooking, anything like that?
I have not really, I don't draw as regularly as I should, but I've got a bunch of sketchbooks around here and an easel, and, I don't do as much of that kind of stuff as I would like to.
Yeah.
I am completely in awe of artists and painters and stuff like that. I was at the Van Gogh Museum in Amsterdam, and it was just a moving experience in the same way that, and I didn't think it would be, I didn't think when I first started, going to art galleries and museums that I would be affected by art in very much the same way that I'm affected by music, very emotionally. Yeah. I do cook. I love to cook. And, the circle of friends around me, are very encouraging, and I use them to try things out. But I probably spend more time thinking about cooking than I do about music. It was something another thing that my father did that I have from him and my mother. They were both great cooks, and some of the physical arts. I really am a fan of boxing, particularly if the opponents are well matched. Right. And so I do what's called mitt work, which is a kind of exercise that is associated with boxing technique. That's very different punches and stuff like that. All of those things, I think, it helps timing. It helps, again, like your, and maybe not your intelligence quotient. Well, an intelligence quotient in another way as well, because boxing is very much a chess game. What will you do if this person does that? How will you defend it? How will you take advantage of them trying to take advantage of you? Right. And so all of these things, I think, are elements that are powerful elements of music that can be used. And so all of those things, I think.
Amazing. And no concerns around hurting your hands, because obviously your hands are your living.
No, because I'm not boxing. I don't box. I do mitt work. I hit a mitt which has padding with a glove that has padding with my hands wrapped, which I've learned from some good people, how to do that to protect my hands. So I'm not banging enough to do any of that.
Well, that's great, because one of my questions was going to be like, what would something be about you that we didn't know, like you had a wood shop in the garage or whatever, but you're doing the mitt work. And if we were coming to dinner, which we'll be there on Tuesday, what's your go-to dish that is like your favorite dish to cook, but you feel like you're really good at?
Well, I mean, there's a number of things. My father was a barbecue enthusiast.
Oh, nice.
And so I've definitely taken some of the pages from him. We don't only have roasted turkey on Thanksgiving and Christmas. We have a barbecue smoked turkey.
Oh, lovely. Very nice.
Hickory smoked turkey. So I've got that technique pretty well together. I like all of the things that my dad said that he never got enough of as a kid. He never got enough chili. He grew up in a big family. Never got enough chili, never got enough barbecue, never got enough Chinese food. So those things are things that I really like to cook and enjoy. Yeah. Enjoy eating as well.
That's really cool. How do they feel about your success, Darryl?
My parents?
Yeah.
Oh, they were very proud of me. I've lost both of them in the last 10 years.
Sorry to hear it. Yeah.
18, yeah. But or in the previous 10 years. My mom died 10 years ago. My father 14 years ago. But they were very proud of me, and I really attribute my success to their upbringing and the atmosphere that they created for me to grow up in. My parents are very much responsible for my work ethic. Very much responsible for my creative attitude. My mother was a person who never ceased educating herself about one thing or another. You know, she was always taking class. I'd come home and there'd be a guitar case, and I was like, "Whose guitar is that?" She's, "Oh, that's my guitar. I'm taking guitar lessons." You know,
Wow.
or piano lessons, or you know, just she never. And I'm very much the same way. I mean, you know, since I've been working with the Stones, I've taken a screenwriting class. I've you know, taken several acting seminars. You know, I've been talking about building instruments. So I took a guitar building class at Musicians Institute a number of years ago, and
Wow.
I'm now building some instruments. And so, yeah, my parents really prepared me for all of this. And you know, when people say to me, "Your parents must have been proud of you," I'm sure that they were.
Yeah.
I'm also very, very proud of my parents.
Mm-hmm.
They were extraordinary people who gave me more than I need to have succeeded, and so I'm very happy about that.
Yeah, it's wonderful. Something to be really grateful for, and what a gift. Not everybody has that. That's incredible. So, you know, you mentioned you're getting into building a guitar or guitars. Can you say more about that, please?
Yeah, Albie Balgosian is a builder out of Waltham, Massachusetts.
Huh.
And he built an instrument for me that is basically what we were trying to do was build a solid body instrument, but it's acoustic. It has a transducer under the bridge, no magnetic pickups.
Wow.
It has the fretboard or the fingerboard that comes out over the instrument in the way that an acoustic bass does, because we thought that sound would help. It would help the instrument sound more acoustic, or a little bit more like an acoustic bass. So it is an electric instrument, but it basically is acoustically amplified.
Wow.
You know, with this pickup that's under that piece of wood. You know,
beautiful.
And so after we'd done this instrument, we talked about doing a production instrument, like and at the time, the prices for pre-CBS jazz instrument, pre-CBS Fender basses was going through the roof. And so we thought, well, it would be great if we could create like a production model of an instrument that would not be so expensive, but also had the qualities of the instruments that we love so much, the pre-CBS Fender instruments. And so I guess that's where it kind of started, because he'd send me something and we look at it and go, well, no, that really doesn't look quite right. And also playing wise, it needs to, you know, have these changes and these changes. So that's, I guess, what put me on the road to that. So we built a production instrument. For a little while, we had ads in the Bass Player magazine, and we were trying to sell it, and that got to be a little bit top heavy. So we decided to license the instrument, and the company we decided to go with was Lakeland.
Okay.
And so we've licensed this instrument to Lakeland for the last, I don't know how many, more than 15, 20 years.
Wow. Incredible.
Maybe. Yeah. So that is, I guess, where the initial interest came. I was out at the Fender Custom Shop. They were recreating some instruments based on my 66 jazz bass that I played with Miles and with Sting when I first kind of came on the scene. And I met a guy who mentioned to me that Musicians Institute had a guitar building course. And so I just kind of something that kind of stuck in my mind. And I thought, that's an interesting idea, you know. And a while later, I started teaching some different bass courses. I did a couple of clinics. I did some private teaching. I did some open counseling there for a number of students. And I mentioned to one of the guys who was working there, I said, you know, I heard that you guys do a guitar building course. And he says, and you know, we do. And you as an adjunct professor, you can take that course.
Nice.
And I thought, well, that's a great idea. So I took the course and got to know John Carruthers, who at the time was the head of that department. And so the instrument that I actually ended up not finishing the course, had to leave and go on tour. When I came back, there was just about a week left in class. During that week, I finished my bass, the bass that I was building for the class.
Amazing.
And I let a few friends play it, and they said, there's some problems here, but this is actually not bad for a first effort. So I decided that I wanted to build a few more, have a few more built. I took it out to John Carruthers' shop out in Camarillo, and he said, well, he says, I could build, we could fix these few problems, a few issues that you have, and I could build some more for you, or you could come out, since you weren't able to finish the class, you could come out and help me do it. And that way you could learn a bit more, and you could decide if this is something that you really want to be involved in. And so that's really basically where it started. So
Great.
we've made so far about half a dozen. We've made 8 guitars, 8 6-string guitars, Tellies and Telly styles, Strat styles, and we've made. We're coming up on about half a dozen basses now.
Fantastic.
2 pickup instruments as well as 1 pickup instruments. I will say that I grew up playing Fenders. And so that is the style instrument that I am most comfortable on and that I really love. And so that what I'm building is being informed by that style.
And will that possibly be the new Darryl Jones signature bass?
Well, my relationship with Lakeland is great. I love that what they're doing with the instrument. I love that people really love it. It's at a cost. The Skyline series is at a cost where students can pay for it. Unfortunately, if I'm going to build American Instruments under this new project, I won't be able to offer them at that kind of price. So I'm suggesting that people continue to go to Lakeland for that. And if you want something a little bit different, a little bit more personal, something that you have a little bit more input into the building of, then I'm asking you to come in and check out my things. We're just getting started. It's not really a company yet, but it's something that I would love to build.
Yeah, sounds exciting. Very exciting.
Okay. But DarrylJones.com is back in effect, and we're hoping to keep some interesting things there. There's a number of things that I want to share with people, not just music, but books I'm reading, recipes maybe, or different things like that. And
as far as any solo projects happening for you, you mentioned with the Stones and solo projects. Anything else coming up for you around that?
Well, there's a number of things that I've been working at. There are a few bands that I am a co-leader with. Okay. One is with that we just worked this past weekend here in Los Angeles with Will Calhoun, who is a drummer with Living Colour.
Great drummer.
And a guitarist who I've known since I was a teenager in Chicago. We grew up in Chicago together, Jean-Paul Borelli, who has been living in Europe for a number of years and is headed back this way now. But we have a trio called Stone Raiders. And it's funny because the name would sound like it's got something to do with the Stones. It does not. It was taken from it's another story. I'll have to tell that story another time. But anyway, we are interested in the music that we're really dealing with is kind of, rock music from the perspective of blues music forward. And I guess one of the it's a rock trio, and one of the bands that we are influenced by and that we do look to as a kind of part of where we're coming from is the Band of Gypsies. Jean-Paul has said to me, he says, man, I really feel like there should be, or when that band came out, there should be a whole genre of music based on that kind of thing. Because in a way, that band it's a modern blues band, and we will say that we'll call it rock or we'll call it rock and roll, but it has its roots in blues music for a number of reasons. One, social commentary. That band, Hendrix and those guys, were commenting on, a Machine Gun is an incredible commentary on war. And so that is one of the things that the band is very much interested in. The name of the record that we put out in 2012 is Truth to Power. And I think that when we look now, we hadn't played for a number of years. When we're looking at the subject matter of some of the things on that record, songs like Money Disease, Power to Spirit, it seems very appropriate, at the time that we are in, at this kind of very time of so many people, so many things butting heads. And blues music, Jean-Paul and I being from Chicago, definitely blues music is part of our DNA, I would say. And Will is from the Bronx, where hip hop was born, where rap music was born, and that kind of thing. So we're really trying to bridge those two things into something cohesive that is. And so I would ask people to check out that record. The name of the band is Stone Raiders, and the name of the record is Truth to Power. You should be able to find that record.
Absolutely.
And if you can't, please get in touch with me at the website, DarrylJones.com.
Okay.
The other project that I've been working on that we're looking forward to doing some more with is a project called Three Brave Souls. The band is me, John Beasley on piano, who was a Miles alumni. We weren't with Miles at the same time, but he played with Miles. And another Miles alumni who, unfortunately, we just lost. Ndugu Chancellor was the drummer for that band, and we lost him about 4 or 5 weeks ago. But we have plans to do more. We put a record out, Three Brave Souls, that you should be able to find. It's kind of the soulful side of jazz. And so we're looking to do more on that. In addition to that, I am working on a record of songs that I've been working on my own. And I've done 2 gigs in Chicago, one in November and one a couple of weeks ago at the beginning of March, where I'm, out front singing and playing and, playing a little bit of guitar. And testing the waters with that. So it's in its beginning stages, but I'm very excited about that because for many years I've been influenced by some of the people that I work with who are great lyricists, Sting, chief among them, Peter Gabriel. And I've wanted to develop music in which I am writing lyrics and talking about, things that are, the stuff that's in my mind and in my heart. I grew up in Chicago at a time where there was a lot of conflict and a lot of awakening of attitudes and stuff like that. And so I'm very interested in sharing that music with people. And
That's fantastic.
So, there are those things and a number of other things. I'm, playing with a number of other people. I've been working some with Mike Stern, who is another Miles alumni. There's, the music world is far and wide, and I definitely want to experiment, in a number of different areas.
Yeah, you're a busy guy, Darryl. With the songwriting process, can I ask how? I mean, I hear folks talking about sometimes it flows, sometimes it's like amazingly difficult. What's that process like for you?
Well, what I'm noticing is it's different every time. Sometimes it's almost like like in Keith Richards' words. And sometimes you're sitting around playing something, some song you wrote or some song that someone else wrote, and a portal will open and you get like an incoming, inspiration. And it can be a little piece that comes through, or it can be a whole entire, it can be an entire song or entire movement or whatever you want to call it. And so that process is different. I think the thing that, from myself and people who are learning songwriting are coming to is that to just be open to whatever happens, to be open to, however it comes, and to it's almost like, birthing some entity into the world. You have to figure out what nourishes it, and when you're feeding it too much, and when to stop is a big thing, for me, because I'm a bit of a perfectionist. So knowing when to let it go and let it go out into the world and stand on its own legs. and again, there's a lot to comment on these days, and so I'm interested in doing that. So it's ever changing, ever changing.
That's fantastic. Have you had, the old story, of course, with Keith of waking up from a dream and satisfaction. Have you had that kind of experience yet of waking up with a tune in your mind?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I don't know that any one of those ideas has actually become full songs yet, but, I document that stuff. I've got a recorder close enough to the bed where when stuff happens, there's a guitar laying in the bed. I have my little acoustic guitar, laying in the bed. So, if I wake up with an idea, I'm pretty good about, getting the basic idea down. But it's, that's also a funny thing because, by the time you start playing it, it might not be the same thing as what you were dreaming, So, again, you have to learn how to appreciate however it comes to you. And so, that's a work in progress. Let us say.
Sure. And like children, letting it evolve, exactly. Right?
Yeah. Letting them evolve. Yeah.
For those, you've had a wonderful, successful career so far, and clearly there's more to come. You're doing a lot of incredible things. For someone wanting to be where you are, what advice might you give them for not only playing, but the sort of networking, the business side of things, sort of what makes a complete musician?
Yeah, I would say, again, first of all, developing your listening skills. And that would go for on the bandstand as well as off, I think personality definitely has a lot to do with being a successful musician, being able to get along with people. And I think familiarizing yourself with a number of different kinds of genres musically. If you want to work with people, there's been more than one occasion where I've had young musicians walk up to me and say, "Man, how do I get a gig, a big gig?" And I say, "Well, who do you want to play with?" And they say, "Well, anybody." Right. Well, you kind of got to decide, if you want to play with John Mayer, right, then I guess the first thing I would do is I would start learning John Mayer's music. Right. Now, you might not ever get a chance to play with John Mayer, but at least you've educated yourself about what he does, how he does it. And I would go and see those people play, but I would kind of decide. I wouldn't just fire the shotgun, with buckshot. I think I would want to like really decide, okay, I would like to play with this artist, this artist, this artist, and this artist. I would begin learning their book. I would begin by learning, what it is that they're doing. I would read as much as I can about them personally and about, their interviews, what they say about music, their approach to music. And I would try to internalize those things in a certain way. I think that's important. I think, in the words of, what Branford Marsalis told me that his father told him, in a way, if you want to be a successful musician, you have to do what many musicians are unwilling to do. Hmm. You have to practice, and, or at least, because to be honest, I wasn't a huge practicer, but I put myself in a lot of musical situations from an early age. I always have. Yeah. When I come off the road, or before I started the last tour I did with the Stones, I was in Japan with Mike Stern, playing completely different music, but I want to keep that knife sharp. And so when I leave the Stones, I want to do something that's maybe a little bit different so that I keep these different tools home. And I think it's important for a musician, if you want to do what I've done, that you have to do that. And I would suggest for any young musician to write songs. Do not segregate yourself to one instrument. I don't know why somebody didn't say to me when I was 10 or 12 years old, you can open your mouth and sing. You can work on that. You don't have to be good at it overnight, but if you add these things in, my brother plays guitar. I never thought about picking up a guitar all the years that we played together. It's something that I really wish I had now, because I'm now trying to catch up. I think that immerse yourself in different kinds of music. Immerse yourselves in, if you're a drummer, pick up a bass and figure out what a bass player has to do in order to do his job. Vice versa. If you're a bass player, sit down at a set of drums and really see what it's like to try to keep a groove happening, so that you just understand things from the other side a little bit. Music is such a vast and lifelong pursuit that I think that immerse yourself in it. And another thing I would say is, I think whether you are a hobby room player, or you are a working musician, or you are a successful touring musician, or you are an incredible artist on your own right, I think we all have to take a moment and give thanks to the universe for allowing us to be musicians in any way. Right. It is an incredible privilege, and I think that we have to be thankful that we get to do it on any level. And I think if you take that into your playing, you also take something that people will recognize. They recognize your love of what you're doing and your appreciation for what you're doing. And I would say that, just to kind of come full circle, you asked me about why the Stones sound like they sound now. I think they're all at an age, and I know that I'm at an age, where you don't take it for granted anymore. It's something that has served you and has taught you and has taken you all of these different places. And you want to, when you pick up the instrument, you want to be conscious of that, and you want to give of yourself to it. And I think when you do that, people who are watching in the audience, people who are witnessing it, they can feel that.
Yeah. Absolutely. Well, and I can feel it right now. I'm thankful for you, Darryl, and your music. I'm a big fan. Thank you so much for being on Musicians on the Record today.
Thank you so much, David.